Howdy, folks. In today's episode, we'll talk about the power of constraints and how you can unlock your creative vision right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we get into it, I've got one thing to ask of you. I've noticed that over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not actually subscribed to this channel. I mean, come on, people. You can really help me out by hitting that subscribe button. It helped me get even more amazing guests on the show. Although, as I always say, I don't even think that's even possible anymore. It's just one click. That's all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, get ready for an incredible conversation with today's special guest, the award-winning visionary of street photography, a master storyteller behind the lens, renowned educator, celebrated author, and Fuji X photographer, the one and only Valérie Jardin. Valérie, so glad to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for joining us again on the Camera Shake podcast.
Hi, Kirsten. Nice to be back. So thank you for having me for another episode.
Yeah, it was. I'm really glad you've come on, because I remember I sent out an email. I think just before Christmas or beginning of December or something. Well, so traditionally I always do an episode, which is I think it's the first episode back every year, which is always a preview episode where people give their opinion on what's going to happen, what's going to be new in 2025 in terms of gear, and trends. And you got back to me saying, like, I'm not interested in trends at all. But if you want to talk about creativity, let's do it. So I thought, awesome. I love a good creative chat. So, Valérie, thank you for coming back.
And I don't keep up with trends or gear. I have no idea what's out there. I have a camera that works. That's all that matters to me. So
yeah, and that's actually, that's really that's a great thing just to start off with, because do you need all of that gear? Do you need all the latest and greatest stuff? Now, I've just come back from Imaging USA, of course, which was jam packed with the latest and the greatest gear.
Sure.
And but do you need all of that stuff actually?
I don't, and I don't think most people do. But there are photographers who are in photography for the gear. Let's just say it. There are photographers who are in it for the art, and those who started because of the gear and the appeal of all this beautiful shiny equipment. Now, I do think those people are also legitimate photographers and they love what they do, but I've never been in that camp, so I can't. I don't even understand it, to be honest. I've been using one camera, one lens, one focal length for over 10 years now, and I have no desire to change. And so, I mean, good for the camera manufacturers, because if everybody was like me, they'd all be out of work. But yeah, I don't understand it, and I really don't think you need all that gear to be creative. Maybe it's the opposite, and I see how the opposite, and to be more of a gear minimalist, has not only helped me become a better visual artist, but a lot of the people who learn with me, and how liberating it has been for so many. So it's not just me. I find that people have this idea that the the more gear you have, the bigger your lens, the better you're gonna be. I don't know. But then they realize that maybe all that gear and all those options may be counterproductive to their creativity. And so, yeah.
Is that because the more gear you have, the more it almost like waters down how much you have to stretch your own creative muscle? Do you think that's what it is?
Probably, yeah, and we've all been there. I mean, I used to shoot with my last DSLR 12 years ago was a 5D Mark II. So dates a little bit. And I had all the beautiful lenses. I was working commercially at the time still, so I had the 24-70, the 70-200, and a bunch of prime lenses, and then you carry, half of them in your bag just in case, right? We all had the just in case backpack, right? And lenses that you rarely ever opened because it's a chore to change lens. And while you're changing lens, well, things are happening, especially when you're an urban photographer. It makes no sense. No, I'm thinking, of course, there are a lot of wildlife photographers out there that need the gear. It depends on what you do. Um, but um, uh, but even then, I don't know. Do you really need those 3 extra lenses in your bag at all times? Or can you limit yourself with 1 and be a little lighter and happier in the process?
I found this years ago, um, when I think when I first started out in photography, I liked the gear. I couldn't really afford a lot of the gear, so maybe that was the thing. You could like, oh, one day I'll be able to buy that lens, or that, you know, and then I'll be able to do that. And what I found was 2 things. One, I ended up with a lot of lenses and didn't use hardly any of them, So that was one thing. And the other thing I found was that when I went out with my kids, for example, and I'd take, my DSLR camera body and 3 lenses because I thought, oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
I could shoot super wide, so I'd take a 14-24. But I also, of course, need the 70-200 because sometimes you might need a zoom, and then of course you need to cover everything in between. So out comes the 24-70 as well. And actually, I end up coming home with hardly any pictures
Mhm.
because the whole kerfuffle of taking, putting your backpack down, taking the camera out, putting the lens on, by that time, the moment's gone,
Yep.
and
It becomes a crutch too, I think. Um, I don't know. Uh, and even if you have a lot of lenses, as you said, you usually have your favorite one, the one that never leaves the camera, right? So do you really need all these other lenses? Maybe not. Uh, I I never I had lenses because of my job at the time. Then when I quit commercial photography altogether and I focused on just teaching visual storytelling on workshops, I soon realized, like, gosh, it's crazy. I don't want to be carrying this for 10 hours every day on the streets of Paris, Berlin, or Melbourne. It doesn't make sense. So that's when I realized that, okay, let's just try. And I almost went cold turkey, as we say. Um, I I got the X100 just before a big European trip. A lot of people know this story, but a lot of people probably don't. And as people know, I live in the US. I'm from France. I'm a French citizen. And so I spent a lot of time in my country. And so it was a summer trip. And on the way, it was a family trip. Every summer, even when the kids were little, we always spent the summers in Europe. And on the way to Paris, we thought, "Oh, let's just spend a few days in Iceland." And, I had just received the X100, and, I didn't know the camera well yet. It was so it's not a point and shoot. Some people say, "Oh, it's a point and shoot." No, it's not a camera for everyone. It's really a photographer's camera. I always say that because you have to really, get used to it. It's like nothing else you've ever used. And so we were just getting ready for the airport. So I had my backpack with the Canon and, the 3 lenses ready to go. And I had I had no bag for the X100. Just grabbed the camera by the strap, and just at the last moment, really, we were getting in the cab to get to the airport. I left the backpack behind. I said, okay, let's just do this. Let's just go with one camera, 23 millimeter, go to Iceland for the first time. And you have no idea how liberating that was. I can't say that at some point during the few days we spent especially in Iceland, because I wasn't doing a whole lot of street photography, obviously. Um, there was not a point where I wished I had that 70 to 200, for those horses up on the hill or whatever. But I made it work, and it taught me to see better. And I think it was that moment that um, I made a big step in my photography. It was definitely a defining. Can you say that defining moment? Yeah. Um, I came back and then we spent a month in France after that, and I came back and I sold everything. Um, and it was also the time where I stopped working for clients, so the timing was good. I'm like, well, if I'm not gonna shoot for client, I have no use for that gear. And at the time, people were not selling. 10 years ago, people still were holding on to their DSLR. I sold my gear for good money, actually, because I still had the boxes for everything. And I remember selling my 70 to 200 for the same amount of money I had bought it. So
Oh,
several
wow.
years before. So so it was good. I never ever looked back. Never regretted it. Never wished I had longer lenses. And I did, when I became an official ex-photographer for Fujifilm, I had the opportunity to try anything I wanted, the GFX and everything. I said, no, I'm not interested. I am not interested. I did shoot with an X Pro 2. I still have that camera, actually. I did shoot with an X Pro 2, but I put a 23 millimeter on it. Where I could have any lens I wanted. I tried the 35, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm too close, I don't like it." When you get when your camera becomes an extension of your vision and you forget it's actually in your hand, that's when you know you have the right camera, you have the right tool, and that's exactly how I feel. Exactly how I feel. That said, a lot of photographers need that little boost just to get out there, that little bit of excitement, and the new camera can do that, just like getting a new car can do that. When things are kinda glum, uh, I'm saying that because 'cause I'm looking at a new car right now because all feeling a little down these days. You gotta need a little bit of excitement, little something a little spicy in your life, and like a new car or a new camera can do the trick. And for a lot of people, if they're feel a little down in their, they're not going out with their camera as often, so then they're not improving if they're not going out as much as they should, with their current camera. If getting a new camera is gonna help them get out more, yes, they'll become better photographers because they'll be out more. So, if that helps people, yeah, getting a new camera can do the trick. Go ahead if you have the money, you know,
It's just the
so
expensive way of doing it, I guess.
exactly. Give yourself an assignment or a project. Maybe that will do the trick with the old gear. But if the new camera can do the trick, hey, go for it. I see that all the time. I have clients that come on workshops again and again, new destination, and they have new toys and they're happy. And so, you know, if it works for them, that's wonderful. It just wouldn't work for me, honestly. Um, I only shoot with the same camera. I get the new edition of it, which keeps getting better, and I love that. But I know where everything is. I don't have I don't need to look at the dials to know what I need to change for the shot. So as long as that stays the same, I don't. And they keep making that camera. I'll keep shooting with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still stuck with the X100F, which I
Hmm.
love.
That was my
And
favorite one, actually. The F.
yeah,
Don't get rid of it.
it's a really cool camera. It's
Yeah.
got so many cool little features, and yeah, it's now several models out of date, I guess,
Hmm.
but it doesn't make it a bad camera at all. It's a very capable machine, that thing.
No, that's what I always say, there are no bad cameras, just bad photographers. And really, You can go back to a camera from 10 years ago. You should be doing the same work you're doing today with your latest gear. That really should not make a difference. Yes, it's faster, it's quiet. We have the right tools for what we want to shoot now. I mean, I was shooting street photography really close sometime in a subway car with a crowd, and I had a DSLR that I brought to my face. I was still getting the same shots. I was just not as invisible, that's for sure. But now we have tools that are better and quieter, and that you don't need to bring to your eye because you have those big LCDs in the back and everything. So we have the right tool for the job. So yeah, it's it's good. It's quite to our advantage. But yes, if you can make if you should be able to make art with any gear, with any old camera, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I always say that. By my own admission, I always, I freely admit that I'm not a very capable all rounder, in terms of photography. There's certain things I know how to do. I mean, by trade, I guess a commercial portrait photographer. And so I know a thing or two about that. But there are other things where I really struggle. I've mentioned it many times on this podcast. Landscapes, not my strong suit. Street photography, I like to get better than. I love street photography, and you know, I take opportunities to work on that and stuff like that. But I always say, like, somebody who really knows what they're doing in a particular field, they can probably outshoot me with a potato. Is the truth,
I love that.
and that's I've seen that many times. In fact, I will, well, just a little preview for those listening or watching. Over the next few weeks, we'll have a good friend of mine on the show, Scott Johnson, who's a fellow Fuji X photographer. And he is an award-winning wedding photographer. Uh, he, in fact, won best in the wedding category at the International Photographic Competition at Imaging USA only about a week or so ago. So a phenomenal photographer. He shoots everything in JPEG. Should I
So
say
do
that?
I.
And it's one of these things, like,
And
you say that to people, they go, "I can't believe it. It's
well,
possible."
that shows a good photographer
Yes.
because you better know your settings and you better, yeah, I mean, you have no safety net. It's
Yeah.
intimidating for people, but I don't think it's intimidating for people. I think people were brainwashed to think that real photographers shoot raw. They even made T-shirt with that on them. Real photographers shoot raw, and and photo clubs have have done a good job at pushing photographers to shoot raw because you're not a real photographer if you don't shoot raw, which actually is kind of the opposite because it, you if you don't shoot raw, you have to make a lot more decision before you press that shutter. And indeed, I think you're a better photographer if you're able to shoot JPEG consistently well than if
Yeah.
you need to rely on a RAW file to make a lot of adjustments. So that always makes me smile because I said, well, then I'm not a real photographer and I really don't care.
I you know, it's not too long ago that people used to shoot on film. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
if you think,
So
like, if you think JPEGs are limiting, try film.
exactly. And even JPEG, I mean, it's really not that limiting. And honestly, I never spend 5 seconds in Lightroom on any picture. Um, in the type of photography I do, there's nothing you're going to do to turn a bad picture into a good one. You can only make a strong photograph into a slightly better one with a couple sliders, right? But I don't remove things. I don't, I'm a purist in street photography, and there's no cloning. There is no removing things here and there. So it's very quick, and so yeah, I can't imagine having to deal with raw files. And I like to the idea of making the decisions before you press the shutter, of color or black and white, for example, because that is something you should know before you press the shutter. That's not something that you should leave to post-processing, or you're not learning anything at that point. And no photograph is gonna be as strong in color as it is in black and white, so the decision should be made when you see the scene in front of your eyes. Is this color or is this black and white? And that will own that all the decisions you make, and I really believe that, and I see it all the time because on workshops, there are a lot of people who come on a workshop for the first time, and I never tell them shoot JPEG only. Never. I that's they do whatever they want. But I often tell them if they're intrigued by it and they say, "Oh, that is so tempting. It would be so liberating to stop shooting RAW." I said, "Well, shoot both for a while and see how much you actually use your RAW files." And then making decisions before you press the shutters. You press the shutter because that's what's going to teach you to become a better photographer. Decisions you make in post processing are not going to teach you to become a better photographer. So once you you once you for example, cropping. Yes, we have the cropping tool is probably the best tool out there, right? Uh, but in the field, you should always be in the frame of mind that it doesn't exist, that you don't have that possibility. So always try to shoot the exact frame you envision, exactly what you want. Yes, you can always tweak it later, but you should never think, "Oh, well, I can crop that later." That is a wrong approach. Get the frame, get an approaching shot if you think the moment is going to be gone by the time you get close enough, but try to get the shot exactly the way you envision it, the story you want to tell that story without relying on the cropping tool. And then, of course, you have it. You can always fall back on it. It can certainly save the day, but it's only if needed and not, "Oh, not." I see a lot of people who um I can tell even in just the way they move to approach a moment, to approach a shot. I can tell they're thinking, "Oh, I can get the shot now and I'll crop it later." But that's a wrong approach, in my opinion. It's a lazy approach, really. Just no, get closer, get it the way you want it. You'll get so much more satisfaction, and you'll become a better photographer, in my opinion.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. Because there's the sort of the polar opposite ideology that basically says shoot it wider so that you can crop it, after the fact.
Yes. To a point, that's true because you need to straighten your verticals, and so you have to give yourself a little bit of space. Yes, but not a picture in a picture either,
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. And I always tell people, one step back sometime, because maybe your horizon line will be all crooked, or you'll need to, your verticals will be distorted. So that will crop a little bit. So you need to give yourself a little bit of space, but not like, 10 steps.
It's an interesting thing because, I often thought about that kind of approach. Because what happens is you're forcing yourself. So in a sense, by limiting yourself, we'll talk about, limitations in a minute, but by limiting yourself in a way, you're forcing those decisions, or you're forcing yourself to make these decisions before you press the shutter. So it's like a front-loaded approach. You have to make the decisions, then you take the picture. Whilst if you're relying on post-production or editing, you just basically take the picture, then you make all the decisions afterwards. And it also means that you have, in a sense, on one hand, you have the freedom to change your decision later on. But I always compare that to, I remember years ago, um, this was before my stepdaughter learned how to drive. I remember having this conversation with her, this slight, well, difference of opinion, let's put it this way, where she was telling me that because she was really good at playing Formula One or something on a PlayStation, she would be an excellent driver. And I said to her, well, no, you're not. You're not. No, 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 I'd be really good at driving a car, because I'm really good at playing Formula One. And I'm like, that's got nothing to do with actually driving a car. Like, unless you take driving lessons and then have a lot of practice, that is what's going to make you a good driver. It's not playing the game. And so sometimes, I feel like with, when you rely too much on post production, it's a little bit like that because you're sort of,
That's a good point.
you're relying on playing the game rather than actually being good at the thing in the first place.
Mhm.
Um,
I never thought of it that way, but that's a really good way to put it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So it took a
And
while.
some people love people who love post-processing are not gonna be street photographer person. We're we wanna be out there, we wanna take pictures, we wanna get them right, so we don't spend time wasting time in front of a computer. It's really not the type of usually the type of photographers who are gonna spend any amount of time in post-processing, but there are people who prefer post-processing to being in the field. I'm pretty sure, like, doing magic in front of a computer. That's fine. It's just not I mean, it's just not really photography at that point. If there's nothing left of the original photograph in the finished image, then it's almost like AI. It's just not it's a form of art, but it's just not photography. But to each his own. If when it comes down to it, they're the only people they need to please with their work, and so if that makes them happy and they like the result, and, who cares? I remember when HDR was, everybody wanted to
Oh
try it.
yeah.
You tried it, I'm sure.
Oh yep.
We all got those I don't remember what it was called. Photo no, I don't remember the software, but we all tried it, and it was so overdone and ugly, but people were like, "Wow." I mean, this is when, this is when people would turn any dull, boring composition into a wow effect just because it was overdone, and it was funny because we all fell for it at some point, and, it's funny now 'cause, I remember doing HDR a million years ago, and I'm thinking, "What was I thinking?" But it's fun
Oh
to
yeah.
try, and if you don't try it, you don't know if you're gonna like it. You may find your thing. I did not know street photography was gonna be my thing. I started photography so late that I tried everything. I mean, I was even a wildlife photographer for a bit. That's how I started, actually. And so I live in such a beautiful place where we have so much wildlife. We have wolves and bears and foxes and so yeah, you want to be a wildlife photographer when you live in such a beautiful place. But then I soon realized that was just not me. I'm too busy. I'm too active to be sitting for a long time, or I don't have the patience for that. So,
So what was it that drew you to street photography in particular initially?
um, well, living in a country that's not mine, and traveling back to France and Europe, because when the kids were little, every time we'd spend the summer back home, we'd go to other countries, and so that they'd experience other cultures and other languages, and so we travel quite a bit within Europe every year, and so when I started doing photography, I found travel photography without people very dull, and so I always included locals in my pictures. I never even thought of it. I didn't even share my work. It was just to me it was a natural thing to do is to include locals and in my travel photographs. And I didn't know it was called street photography, like many people, I think. I think a lot of street photographers start their street photography journey during their travels. Very few people start in their own city. And so that was the same for me. I didn't see much of a potential here on the streets in the cities. Uh, but when I was traveling to new countries, I thought it was amazing. And so so I started doing that and people started noticing and um and then I realized that as long as there are people, there is potential everywhere, and I do think that, I always remind my students, shoot in your own city and shoot often because you have the advantage. You should actually do your best work here in your own in your own city, big or small. You should do your best work because you have the advantage of being able to go often. You know the light, you know the habits of the routine, of life on the street. It's that part is very similar to wildlife photography. You have to know the migration patterns and everything. You have to learn when is the bird coming back to the nest and da 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 da. So in a way, it's a little bit similar. And so when you're in your environment, you know all that already. You know of what time that beautiful shaft of light is gonna hit that sidewalk. And whereas when you travel, it's a bit overwhelming because everything is new, and so it's easier to get scattered when you travel in a new place. And whereas at home, you can focus on really making beautiful images. I think you really take the time to do that when you're on a family trip, in Tokyo or wherever you may be. You really have to be on your own to do this.
How do you think is your like, let's say your creative vision, how would you say that changed from when you first started with street photography to now?
Um, well, I don't know. I never followed trends, but there are trends in street photography. You can see them on social media. People start shooting what they think is going to bring the likes because they see people shoot, very minimalist silhouettes, very deep shadows, and so they start trying to shoot that because they see those pictures are popular. So there are trends. And I never followed trends because that bores me. I follow my mood. And when you look at my work, or if I look at my work from a few months ago, a few years ago, I know exactly how I was feeling emotionally at the moment I shot a specific frame. That's why I call the emotional metadata, which to me is in every picture. And it's really a reflection of me and how I was feeling that day. So, and because I'm an educator, I love to shoot every type of there's so many ways to approach street photography. You can be a minimalist, you can be in people's face, you can shoot completely anonymously where you don't even recognize people's faces. You can do a lot of visual poetry with movement. There's so many ways to approach it, and I feel that there is a way that people are going to enjoy more than another. I enjoy all of them, but I'm not going out on the street thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna only do minimalist today," or "I'm only going to do motion." No, I just follow my mood of the day, and, I never go out with a plan. I let the street surprise me, and I like it that way. Other people need an assignment or a self-assignment. That's fine as long as it gets them out there. Depends where you are in your photography journey as well. If, the moment you don't care what people think, of your work is really the moment that you will become a better photographer. I can guarantee that. Too many people shoot for the likes, and that's easy to we have fragile egos as artists, and, it's easy to fall for that, but really, you again, especially for street photography or landscape photography, whatever it is, chances are you're not shooting for a client at that moment, right? You're shooting for yourself. So you're really the only person you need to please. And that's really important.
So what's your, because you mentioned assignments earlier,
Hmm.
which I generally think assignments are a really good idea for a number of
Hmm.
reasons. But what do you do when you sort of hit a wall, or when you feel like you're creatively you're stuck in a rut? What is the thing that you do that gets you out of that?
I just go out with my camera. I'm For me, it's really more about the journey than the photograph. So, I'm happy being out there with my camera, even if I don't take a picture, as long as I have my camera and I see and appreciate the beauty of everyday life. If I come home with 10 frames and only one that I'm going to keep, hey, that's awesome. It's fine. So in my in the genre of photography I do, you really have to enjoy the journey because the your rate of keeper is going to be so low. It's so difficult that if you don't enjoy the journey, you're going to be very, very frustrated. Then you might as well just go shoot, at the botanical garden and shoot beautiful pictures of flowers and which I do occasionally. I'm not going to say I still use my X100 for everything I do, but there are times where, I just wanna do something different. So that's a good way to approach if you need a little boost in your creativity. Actually, I have a free ebook on my on my website, and I think of it as 10 tips to boost your creativity, and that's for any type of photography. And, some people like to change lens or do creative things. I love to be creative. I don't I can't change lens. So I do a lot of really fun things. Like I was just sitting in Paris with my workshop students and I had this empty glass of water right next to my camera on the table at the cafe and I started shooting through it. And I had one of my favorite pictures of my weekend in Paris, shooting through 2 layers of glass, and it gave you that really, beautiful filter that, yeah, you could probably do in post-processing. How boring would that be? Or you could use a creative focus lens, which I used to have, but that's why I have an X Pro 2. I had some of those lens baby lenses. Yeah, you could do that. And that's fun. That's a lot more fun than post-processing, whatever. But you can do it with just, anything that you can put between you and your subject. And so I had this assignment for an online class I'm giving recently. And, one, photographer got a really cool photograph by putting Scotch tape in front of her lens. So, like, 3
Ugh.
layers of 3 strips of Scotch tape on her lens and got some really, really cool, very creative photograph. Anything you can do movement. So, I love doing that, especially when, if you're in a rut. A lot of people say they're in a rut because they're not traveling and they're kinda stuck in the same on the same streets or the same environment. Well, then try a new technique. Try camera movement. Try putting something in front of your lens. There's always something you can do to get you out the door to try something new or give yourself an assignment. That's there's plenty of that. People have already that was the most common thing, I think, the first few years when I was teaching, people asking me, "Oh, I wanna go out there, but I don't know what to do," and so I wrote a book, 75 assignments. That's actually, I think, out of print or going out of print soon, but the electronic version, I think, will still be available, and so they have 75 assignments to just randomly pick from. Um, and, um, and that book was very popular. I think there are several other street photography books of assignments now, but at the time, they really weren't very many. And so, then there's no more excuse. Pick up an assignment. Put the book in your on your phone, an ebook on your phone, pick an assignment and go out and play for an hour or 2. And so, yeah, some people need a boost. I really don't. As long as I'm out with my camera and I see, um, I s I'm in the zone, and I it's my happy place. I could forget all the bad things that are happening right now.
how do you learn to see? I mean, especially in street photography, it's such a quick, fast environment that's like forever changing. I mean, it feels to me, it sometimes feels chaotic, especially when you go
Yeah.
into a big city like London or New York City or something like that,
Mhm.
or really, I mean, any major city, Munich or whatever it might be. But it seems such a uncontrollable environment, and I come at that as somebody who's used to working in a studio where I control everything. I control the lighting, I control
Sure.
the pose, I control every last little thing. And then I find myself in almost like a chaotic environment. And then I look at, your imagery and the way you see these instances happening. How do you train yourself to see that? Well, when I look at a scene, sometimes it's just chaos. You know,
Yeah.
is there a way
I
that you can
I'm
train
a
yourself
very
to see?
m I'm a minimalist in my composition. If you notice, I never
Mm.
shoot crowds. I don't like crowds. So it's really isolating something. Even when I'm in a crowd, I'll isolate a subject. I don't like it. I don't even like looking at pictures that have too many layers. Visually, I don't it doesn't interest me. So I'm not gonna shoot something that doesn't interest me, right? So I'm much more minimalist. I like clean composition. And yes, you're right. It's a challenge when you're in a busy place, and most cities get busy. So it's really moving yourself doing that dance that we do to isolate something without having all this distraction, the cars, the people, and everything. Because I don't remove anything from my pictures. I do minimal cropping as necessary, but it's really about capturing that moment, that story, that visual poetry. So I don't know, I think the more you do it and the more you're true to yourself and to what, um it's about an emotion, and so, it's hard to tell. People often ask me, well, I remember when people started asking me, "Can you teach street photography? We would really like to learn with you in the streets of Paris." And so it's like, "But how can I teach something I never learned?" And that stuck with me because I never learned it. I started doing it, and that's the way I've been doing it. And so and because it really I followed my heart, I never try. And I think people try too hard. You really need to just take a deep breath and just follow your heart, and not think that you're gonna get 10 great pictures at the end of the day. No, you'll have 10 okay pictures, and you may have one that stands out from the rest, and that should make you pretty happy. So it's resetting your expectation, having fun with it, not being too hard with yourself, just realizing that this is just the hardest thing you're ever gonna shoot. Um, and, um and yeah, just enjoy the process. I think people get frustrated because they realize, "Oh, this is so hard," and then that kinda ruins the experience for them too. And then or they try to find shortcuts where, they'll stage a shot or something, but then they're robbing themselves from the 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 pure joy of capturing that decisive moment, that is that's never happened before, will never happen again. And so I urge people to just keep shooting. Don't look for shortcuts. It's not You're not gonna be satisfied very long if you do that. So, yeah. I
What
probably didn't even answer your question. I don't know. I just keep
I
getting
know.
carried away.
Well, I tell you, what really, I remember the last time we had a conversation, and I remember I was asking you about, post processing and editing, and you said, "Well, I don't actually edit." You know, that's
Very little.
that's
Yeah.
basically it. And immediately, in my brain, it was like, "Oh, that's cool, actually. Oh, that's something to try."
Mhm.
That's something to try. One thing I tried was, I got into shooting film a little bit, um, and of course, there's no editing after that. It's basically
What's
whatever
wrong?
it is in the frame is in the frame, and it's strangely freeing, despite the fact that you have to go through all the kerfuffle to actually even get the picture. But that's also the beauty of it, in many ways, because it is harder in that way. It's not like you can't just look on the back of the camera and see what you've just shot, or just upload your images on a computer and then there they are. You actually have to go through a process to
Mhm.
get to them, and it's almost like an unveiling of those images rather than a processing. To me, it's always I'm still so perplexed by the whole process of film development that I'm convinced there's some degree of magic involved in this whole thing. It's not
Mhm.
natural.
Yeah, yeah, it's true.
But do you have like a sort of a ritual or a particular habit or something that you go through every time you go out to take pictures? Is there something that is sort of maybe aids to getting you in the right frame of mind?
Nope. Hell, there's just no secret, and I'm always eager to look at my pictures. Some people kind of sit on them for a few days or a few weeks. Not me. I'm like, oh, that doesn't matter how tired I am. I'm gonna look at my pictures every night, wherever I am. So, um, I just I don't know. Some people wanna listen to music, not me. I love the sound, the smell of the streets. That's all part of the experience, and, um, and I'm okay with putting the camera down and enjoying the moment, knowing, like, sometimes you see something really, really beautiful, but you know that you'll never be close enough to capture it without disrupting it, and so, at that point, I just enjoy it without the camera. And that's something I wasn't always able to do. I think that shows maybe, that's part of the growth, is to be able to enjoy the moment without absolutely needing to capture it, because I don't wanna be that street photographer that's going to be too pushy or make people uncomfortable. And so there are many moments that I witnessed that, yeah, I wish I could immortalize, but I know from experience that if I get the shot that I'm envisioning, I'm going to disrupt whatever's I see that's so beautiful, and I'm just not even gonna do it, but I'm gonna enjoy it. And so I think when you get to that point where whether you get the picture or not, you can still enjoy that moment and you're not feeling frustrated, that's a good place to be. I hear all the time on workshops, people tell me, "Oh, I saw that beautiful moment, but I couldn't get it. I didn't get it. I wasn't quick enough," or whatever it is. And I said, "You know what? It's great. You saw it." And most people don't see. And so you can't have one without the other. So the fact that you saw it and you appreciated the beauty of that moment of everyday life, whether it was an expression, a gesture, the light that hit a certain person at that point, whatever it was, the fact that they saw it, there is growth and there is learning. And yes, most of the time you'll miss the shot. And so that's just a fact of life. That's just what street photography is. And but you have to be happy witnessing the moment without feeling the frustration. That's hard. That's hard.
Yeah, and you know who taught me that was my daughter when she was about 4 years old. Because I remember I can't remember, was it? It may have been New Year's Eve. Maybe it was New Year's Eve. And I think we were in Germany, and the tradition in Germany is like big fireworks, on New
Mhm.
Year's Eve. And so I remember we were watching the fireworks. Everybody was out in the street, as it is tradition, midnight. Everybody's out in the street, and lots of fireworks going off. And I remember I was trying to photograph the fireworks. And at some point, my youngest daughter, must have been about 4. She just went, you know, stop with the camera. Just look at it.
So true, and I
Yeah.
think of that every time I see, um, any kind of show where everybody is looking at it through their tiny little screens instead of enjoying it in real life. See, I never document I never even tried to photograph this type of events, because I find it a shame to be watching something through that tiny little screen. So, um, and it's so in the same way, sometime, yeah, witnessing a beautiful moment, and sometimes you're sitting at a restaurant and you witness a beautiful moment, or surprise, or, that you'll never be able to photograph. You're sitting right next to the people in an intimate setting. Obviously, you're not going to pull out the camera and take a picture. But that should make you feel good. You should be happy to witness that and to see it, because so many people cannot see. Um, so when people come on workshops, I'm not teaching them how to use their camera. They should know how to use their camera. That's the easy part, right? Knowing the technical part will always be the easy part. When my goal is to open their eyes and to show them the beauty of everyday life, so that whatever gear they have in the future, whatever, they can always learn to use their gear. They can learn all the technical part of photography in the comfort of their own home. I'm going to teach them how to see, and that's really the goal. And so many people can't see. And then there are people who are completely natural. We don't have to put any effort into it. And it doesn't matter what gear they have. They could be shooting with their phone and they're going to make art right away. For some people, it's going to take a lot longer. So it's always fun to see the progress too.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's I sometimes, I'm always torn between setting myself an assignment. Like, for instance, a typical assignment could be something I've heard before is that when somebody says, like, okay, well, go and go and get a cup of coffee and tell the story of that in pictures, and you're going to need this one way of doing it. And I'm always looking for little sort of mini assignments for myself sometimes, just to kind of, just to get my creative juices going. What kind of what works for me is that when I start off with I call it a mini assignment like that, or a little mini project, whatever you want to call it. And then I'm sort of in the right frame of mind. And then for me, for some reason, then it's like as if somebody's unlocked the door to creativity, and then it seems to flow. And I like doing that. So where I live on the outskirts of London, basically, when I go into town, I go to a place called Marylebone, which is sort of a direct train link. And then you're right next door to a place called Baker Street. And that whole area really lends itself for that kind of street photography. There's just a lot going on, but at the same time, it's also not as heaving as it would be in central London. It's just that, it's the right balance of activity and non-activity, where you could actually end up with a relatively empty frame if you wanted to. If you go to Piccadilly Circus, there's just no way you can photograph anything.
Those are the places I avoid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I teach contemplative photography as well, which is not people. It's contemplative photography. And I think it's a good complement. It's a good, it complements street photography in a way. It helps you be more creative. It helps you be in the moment more. And I like to combine both. And I like in my teachings as well. It's really important. I mean, you should be able to make art within 3 feet from where you're sitting right now with your camera. And that's really important. It's an important reminder. You don't need to go to places. You can make art with your camera in your own room, in your own house. And I think that's a good reminder. And I love when I open people's eyes to that, because all of a sudden their world just becomes bigger, because they don't have to travel. They don't have to go to fancy places to actually learn to see and practice and learn. So you only learn by doing, really.
It's an interesting thing. You're absolutely right. When you say that you can create art literally 3 feet from where you're sitting. And I remember during the pandemic, I remember hearing this so many times where people said, like, oh, I haven't taken, it's lockdown, it's been locked down for 6 months or whatever. I haven't taken my camera out of the bag, for like 6 months. And I'd ask why. And okay, because I can't go anywhere, to photograph anything. It's like, well, but there's so many opportunities in your house or in your garden,
Yeah, exactly.
And it was this shift of um, of mindset that sometimes was the problem. Because I remember, like, especially on on the camera club sort of scene, people are very often set in the thing that they do, like they shoot wildlife,
Mm.
and that's what they do, and they love doing
Yeah.
it. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, but when you're in a situation where you just can't shoot wildlife every day in the same way that you've done before, you know, you could try something else in the
Absolutely.
house. Or like a friend of mine, a good friend of mine started doing that, I think during the pandemic. He's a musician, but also likes to shoot wildlife. So he set up instruments in his garden and just waited for birds and squirrels and stuff to
Oh,
interact with
fun.
those. And that was his thing. That was his project. And he turned it literally, I
Yeah.
think he's still doing it.
There's been
It's
so much creativity during the lockdown, and some countries had a much harder lockdowns than others. So I
Yeah.
know in the UK or in France, it was pretty rough. And actually, that's when I started teaching contemplative photography because I realized that people around me, or we'd do, I'd be chatting with people, and they're like, "I haven't touched my camera in weeks," and then I started to say, "Okay, I can help, I can help," and so I started, putting together an ebook, and then I started teaching that class, which has been hugely successful, and it kind of for some people, it was like a breath of fresh air, and I felt good about it because I'm like, "Oh, making a little difference. I'm helping a little bit, even if it helps 10 people." That's good because those were dark, dark days, as well. So I find that, we're so, so, so lucky, and I say that all the time. I feel so fortunate to have photography in my life. I did during the pandemic, even though, I travel for a living, and
Mhm.
I had to stop my main gig for over a year because everybody was stuck. I was creative in other ways. I worked on projects. I did a lot of things, and I feel like we're in that time again, dark days. And so photography is the constant, and photography can make a difference. Not only it can make a difference for ourselves, it's our therapy. It's just, I mean, art is therapy. But you can also make a difference in the world. Like I'm working on a project right now called One Love, and it's moments of everyday life in the LGBTQ plus community. There's never been a more a more pressing moment than today, to do this project. It's so important, and so use your photography for good things. It will help you. It will help others. You have the skill set of being able to tell a story in a frame. Use it. Use it.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful medium that and so you can help people, you can make a difference. We're not going to make huge changes, obviously, but we can all make little changes, right? And it all adds up. And so use your photography for that. I think, and other things as well, but you have the chance to have that, and then you will also benefit greatly because for your mental health, it's the best thing.
Absolutely. And again, you most of the time you don't have to look very far to find worthwhile,
Oh,
opportunities like that.
yeah,
What you
yeah.
just mentioned about the LGBT plus community, and we over here in London, we have an increasing problem with people sleeping rough, and
Mhm.
it's for a number of reasons, economical reasons, and various other reasons. And so somebody I know runs a charity, um, and they basically drive around London feeding people who sleep rough, and don't have anywhere to go to, and they distribute clothing and
Mhm.
food and all the rest of it, and there are always opportunities to get involved in projects just like that to
Mhm.
y-
Absolutely.
to use photography, or video even to shine a light on those
Mhm.
things, and um, maybe disturb some preconceptions that people may
Oh,
have.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I worked with Joshua Coombs, and the Do Something for Nothing movement. And I worked with him with the homeless communities in Paris and New York, and to really raise awareness. And it was not only a very I mean, what he does is amazing, and um and we showed the work. People cried. People don't know um, who is out there on the street. It could be you and me. I mean, especially in the United States, everybody is a paycheck away from homelessness. You know, it's scary times, and homelessness has never been a bigger problem here than it is today. And and the misconception. I mean, I learned a lot. I mean, everybody has um, preconceived ideas, and working on the project and talking with those people, sharing laughs and tears and hugs while I was doing the project, and hearing the stories that those people were. I met veterinarians that were sleeping on the streets. I met people who came from other countries because they were promised a job and never got the job and were too afraid to go back home because they were embarrassed. And I mean, I met so many, all different kinds of walks of life. And doing that project not only was important to show what Josh was doing. So Josh is this young Englishman who cuts the hair of homeless people around the world and started the movement hashtag do something for nothing. And so following him and seeing him brighten someone's day by offering a haircut on the streets of New York or Paris, and changing lives, and then documenting that to bring light to the problem was so important. It was a life-changing project for me. Definitely. And so we can do that. We don't have to travel to do that. You can do that in your own town. Wherever you are, there is something that needs to be documented, that needs to be shared to the world, to bring awareness, to put a face and a name to those people, and bring awareness. So use your photography for awareness. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it could be, as you say, it could be absolutely anything, because if
Mhm.
nobody knows about it, nobody can ever do anything about
It could
anything.
be go to the dog shelter, just use your photography to help the adoption process of those dogs that are waiting for forever a home. It can be anything. You really can make a difference. And of course, it's never going to be something huge that's going to change the world, but it's step by step, brick by brick, right?
Exactly. Now,
So,
in in the intro to this episode, I mentioned the word um, constraints, and we cut into that a little bit when we talked about gear. Um, how can we or how can photographers sort of turbo boost their creativity by actually minimizing what they do, or by constraining themselves in some ways?
okay. You'll have to rephrase that. I'm sorry. So, what do you mean?
So,
What they can do with their current gear, or
well, it could be gear, or it could be it could be, yeah, it could be gear, or it could just be their strategy and how they approach,
okay,
for instance, how they approach going to shoot, street photography, for example. What I mean is, sometimes limiting yourself, or very often in my experience anyway, limiting yourself in some way will actually sort of turbocharge your creativity, because, as we mentioned in the beginning, it just forces your creative muscle to flex. You know, um, and I've found that in the past, that by not taking all the lenses with me, and
Mhm.
by maybe taking a different approach, maybe an unusual approach, it actually forced me to think outside the box. And and what I got out of it, the images I got out of it, were really different. And and yeah, and I couldn't have created them in any other way. I remember, for instance, I remember one time I went into London with the idea of creating some street photography, but I was kind of bored of taking, the standard 50 mil lens and blah, blah, blah. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to take a super wide 14 mil. That's all I'm going to do for today. That is all I'm going to do. Right.
Yeah.
And I got some amazing shots, like in the underground, for example. I remember, and in the business district, stuff like that. So, shots that obviously I wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and just scenes that I wouldn't have seen had I not taken a lens that anybody would have said, like, well, that's a nonsense lens to take. What are you taking at? Do you know what I mean? So my question is really, what strategies can somebody use to, on one hand, limit themselves, but on the other hand, actually turbocharge their creativity?
Well, anything you do to limit yourself will make you work a little bit harder, as you said. So, the creative juices will flow. I mean, for a while, you may be a little stuck if it's really out of your comfort zone. But creativity really starts outside your comfort zone. If you're always doing the same thing and it's too predictable, it's boring for yourself. It's boring for people who look at your work. If you're always producing the same work, but more importantly, I feel like if you're not challenging yourself to shoot differently and see differently, it's boring for the artist himself or herself. And so, for some people, yes, it's trying something completely different, like new gear, or limiting yourself to some people have been very creative, just limiting themselves to a city block. I'm gonna spend 2 hours in one city block, and I've done the exercise actually. Not that long ago, this last summer, I did the exercise. I limited myself 1 hour, one block, and see how many keepers I could have. So whatever works. There's so many ways you can do this. You can try something that you've never tried before, like shooting everything in movement and creating completely different images in a familiar places, but seeing it in a completely new way. So yeah, whatever works. There it's limitless, really. Yeah. I think whatever limitations, if you only shoot color, just go out and set your camera just in black and white. Shoot in square format only. In JPEG, because square format in RAW doesn't mean anything. So square format JPEG, where you really can't change that square, and just see in square for a day, a month, whatever, or an entire project. Set out to do a project of just commuters in square format, black and white. And then every time you go and shoot for that project, it's going to be consistent. Or if you never shoot color and see how much more you have to think before you press the shutter, because there's so many more things to take into consideration to make a strong photograph. So whatever it is, just do the opposite of what you're used to.
And that's not bad advice. You just simply do the opposite of what you think you should be doing. And that's often, that's the thing. Never shoot from eye level, like always, or just go out and shoot, low angle compositions for this time. And of course, I should mention that this podcast is sponsored by Platypod, and there are excellent tools available for low angle compositions, of course. All you have to do is go to platypod.com, and all will be revealed.
Good. Yeah.
But I mean, that's actually I mean, not a segue into gear, but actually, as we were mentioning gear, in all seriousness, I'm not saying this because Platypod is a sponsor of this podcast. But just from our own experience, sometimes new tools like that can really force you to be more creative, because they allow you to do things that otherwise you wouldn't have necessarily even thought about doing, or you would have probably not done them because it's too complicated, like low angle stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think there's nothing more repetitive than looking at a body of work that's shot everything at eye level. And you see it a lot. It's like, oh my gosh, we have so many tools, whether, you get a little gadget that will force you to set your camera in different places, or you do it yourself. But getting down on our knees every 5 minutes or flat on the ground is not always very comfortable. But we have tilt screen. We have so many tools that can make more creative imagery. Use that. Use that. It's so much fun. Yeah, I can tell when I do a lot of portfolio reviews, and I can tell when a photographer only brings the camera to their eye, because they're a lot less likely to shoot from above or set the camera on the ground, because they're not used to thinking about live view or shooting blind, because they they know their camera so well, and they know their focal length. They're always shooting at eye level. And it's fun to shake things up. You make much more dynamic compositions that way. So absolutely, whatever it takes. I mean, we talked earlier about the specialty lenses that can create beautiful blur. Um, get one, rent one for a weekend, shake things up a little bit. Yeah, absolutely. The sky's the limit. Whatever gets you out there to create is a good thing.
Now, earlier you mentioned, being able to see things. What sort of advice would you give photographers who struggle to make their images more intentional? Because this is the thing with street photography. Often things can feel a little accidental. Something happens. I just happen to press
Yeah.
the buzzer.
Mhm.
Um, so, what advice could you give somebody? If you're trying to make something feel more intentional.
Well, you should always press the shutter with intent. The spray and pray approach is only going to take you so far. So shoot less and shoot better. Limit yourself. Pretend, you don't need to shoot film to limit yourself to a roll of 36 exposure. Shoot 36 frames for a day and see how much more intentional you're going to be and how much better your work is going to be. I think really digital is amazing for the learning curve, and photographers uh, have been able to learn to become stronger at composition and everything else much faster. And there you don't have the I learned with film. So, you come back from a trip or whatever, and you spend so much money on getting your pictures developed and everything. You really thought twice before you pressed the shutter. Whereas here now people can shoot a lot. They have instant gratification. They can correct on the spot, their settings, because they can see what went wrong in the back of their camera. So they can learn much quicker. Well, the problem is once they've learned the ins and outs of their camera, and then they should try to reverse that and not continue to shoot a ton just to get the lucky shot. And so at that point, shoot less. Only press the shutter on a sure shot. And of course, every sure shot is not going to be a great picture, but at least it had the potential to be. And stop asking people, oh, or showing black and white and color of the same frame. No, that is your responsibility to know what is stronger. It's your picture. That decision should have been made before you even press the shutter, if it's color or black and white. So just own it, and um and feel good about what you do. And again, you're the only person you need to please. If it has soul, if you have an emotional connection to that photograph, then it's probably a good photograph. Don't overthink it. So I don't know. I don't know if that helps, but these are common things that I see that get in the way. They get in the way. Just the same as sharpness gets in the way. I see so many sharp, technically perfect, boring pictures. I want to cry. Show me soul, show me emotion, show me movement. Um, it- it- in anything, not just street photography, where sharpness is definitely overrated. In anything, you should really the embrace the imperfection that make the moment so much more authentic.
Well, I think that's, that argument about like perfection versus like, creativity in a sense, that's a massive argument to have because
Mhm.
it's really, I think it's sort of technology's fault to a degree,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
things can be so perfect. And that's actually one of the reasons why I love going out and shooting some film with an old Mamiya camera that I have, which is a
Oh,
120 film,
wonderful. Yes.
and it's a dual lens um camera, and it's hard. I find it difficult. It's hard. It
Mhm.
really challenges me. I'll be honest. I find it difficult. It's slow. It's takes forever to get anything in focus for that damn thing. You know,
Yeah.
but what it means is you just have to invest more into it. And so
Mhm.
with that camera, well, it's medium format film, so it's 12 shots per roll. Realistically, with that one, you get 11 because the first one's always screwed up, right? So, sorry, bear with me. For some reason, that is very strange. That was my
That
iPad
will be a
ringing.
cut. Oh.
Yeah, well, there's that. That was my iPad ringing, not my phone. I was thinking, like, what's going on here? How bizarre. Um, what was I saying?
Oh,
Oh,
going
Mamiya,
out
yeah.
with the film. Yeah.
Yeah, so um, it's very slow.
Mhm.
Everything takes forever on that darn thing. Um, but it's a really front-loaded process in a sense. You have to put a lot of energy into capturing that frame. And although you might only come back with, well, in my case, 11 shots, each one of those shots means a lot more because you've put a
Yep.
lot more energy into it.
Yep.
And for me, in a sense, like having even just one keeper on that roll is
Oh,
so much more
wonderful.
valuable. Yeah. Because you
Mhm.
think like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I really hacked that one. In a way.
And I really do think that you can achieve that with a digital camera too. Just just only raise the camera on uh, a potential keeper. So many people shoot, 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 shoot. Like, take a breath. It just just enjoy the moment, enjoy the experience and and really limit yourself to shooting something that will be a potential keeper, not not overshoot. I think people just shoot too much.
Yeah, the
I mean,
overshooting thing is
quality over it's, quality over it should be quality over quantity, but it's often the opposite. Yeah, especially when you've been doing this for a while. When you learn, yeah, it's okay. When you learn, you need to make mistakes. You don't learn from your success, you learn from your mistakes. Make a lot of mistakes and shoot a lot and learn a lot. But um, once you're a proficient photographer, then slow down, slow down.
it's the overshooting thing is often an issue. And I remember because you often see that, like, especially in street photography, the typical scenario where you have like a slice of light and then you're waiting
Mhm.
for a person to walk through that to
Yeah.
get a perfect sort of shot. You know, the amount of times that I see people just going into burst mode and just basically ramming as many frames in as they can, is bizarre. And I'm thinking like, hey, my Z8 does 120 frames per second.
Oh.
I'll
Well,
definitely get the
you might as
shot.
well do video. You might
Yeah,
as well
well,
do video,
exactly.
and just freeze a frame. No, when my students and there are times when you wanna be in burst mode, there are times where you only have that opportunity, but go in a burst of 3 or 4, not a burst of whatever, 20 or more. It's like, who wants to look at all those pictures? So, yeah, do allow yourself a burst mode, that will put more chances on your side on the streak, but limit yourself to a burst of 3 or 4. That would be my tip of the day.
Valerie, you've photographed many different cities. Is there a particular city that sort of sparks your creativity in particular?
Oh, Paris. That will always be. Um, I and it's funny because it's home, but, I never get tired of the streets of Paris, and I can't say that of every city. There are cities where I'm like, "Oh, I don't wanna ever go back. I'm done." Or even cities where I've been just once, where I say, "No, it 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 doesn't inspire me." Um, there's many city I mean, Berlin would be in the top 5, Copenhagen, um, definitely. I mean, there are cities where I know it also matches my aesthetics, more minimalist, um, um, the architecture. I like different types of architecture. I don't want just only old ruins. I like some modern in the mix too. So, to get that balance, um, and, I'm excited. I'm coming back to London in October, to teach, and I'm excited. London has I knew London really, really well growing up, and then I didn't go for a long time, and then I went again about 10 years ago, and then again 5 years ago, and it has changed so much, so I'm so excited to explore more and to teach there. So and who knows, maybe one day I'll find a city that inspires me more than Paris, but I don't think it's gonna happen. I always say if I lived in Paris, I probably wouldn't go anywhere else.
Yeah,
I
for a
love
long
it so
time,
much.
for
Yeah.
a long time, I thought about that. I thought about London in a way, and it's really only over the last few years, maybe over the last sort of 6 or 7 years, that I've really gotten into going back into London. And like you say, it has changed
Yeah.
dramatically. It is unreal. I
Mhm.
mean, I moved to London in 1996, and I remember flying in for the first time and only seeing one skyscraper, which was Canary
Yeah.
Wharf.
Yeah.
Um, And everything else was flat, and I remember being really surprised. I'm like, "Wow, this is a flat city. What's going on? Like, where is the business district? It's not here." Oh,
Yeah.
and this is because, of course, traditionally, there used to be this thing that buildings weren't allowed to be taller than St. Paul's. That was the rule, essentially, and consequently, London turned out to be a pretty flat city until the mid-90s when they pulled up Canary Wharf. And now, of course, there's skyscrapers everywhere, and it's always some new bizarre skyscraper.
Yeah.
It's a weird
I mean,
shape.
it's pretty exciting architecture, I would
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
And then, of course, the Olympics also had a major impact,
Sure. Yep. Yep.
in like rejuvenating and then developing some parts of the
Mhm.
city. And it feels like definitely over the last 10 years, or maybe over the last 15 years, there's been a mega boom in development. And actually, I was on a roof terrace in central London, with a great view of the city, and the amount of cranes you can see is unbelievable. The amount of building work that's going on is incredible. So whatever is going to happen over the next 5 years, I don't know, but it's going to be different.
And all those little pockets of neighborhoods,
Yeah,
you take a little alley and you're in a completely different, setting, and the opportunities for street photography is quite amazing, quite amazing. There's cities where, it doesn't matter where you are in the city, it kind of always looks the same, it's the same type of walls or the same type of graffitis, and
mm,
it's like, okay, it's tiring for street photography because you want, especially when I teach, I wanna give, my student the opportunity to practice a lot of different techniques and have different backdrops and such. So there are cities that are a lot more exciting for that than others, for sure. Yeah.
yeah. London is definitely one of my favorite towns when it comes to
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Brighton is also pretty because you've got the seaside and the seafront,
Yeah.
so that gives opportunities.
I spend weeks every year, throughout the year, every season, on the beach, in a small town of 5,000,
Yeah.
and I do probably half my work there. So you don't need a big city. To do street photography, you don't even need a street. You need people. You need stories. You need emotion. And so, yeah, the street is optional. You can do street photography anywhere. Yeah.
So for all of those listening to this or watching this on YouTube, by the way, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, then did you know that there's a fully fledged version over on YouTube? Well, you should by now because we mention it all the time. So for all of those listening who are thinking, oh, actually, street photography might be a really cool thing to get into because I feel, a little bit stuck in a rut with the stuff that I normally do. This, sounds like a good idea. What's the one piece of advice that you wish you had received when you first started in street photography?
Um, Really just follow your heart and don't follow a trend. Um, and there's so much misconception about street photography. A lot of people think that street photography is being in people's face. So educate yourself. See all the many ways you can tell the story of everyday life. There's so many ways you can do it. You certainly don't have to be in people's face, and if you're close to people, please don't be in their face. That would be the worst thing. But a lot of people have that misconception. Not at all. There are so many ways, and one way will definitely inspire you to get started, and then you'll explore a lot more. But you may there are people that are really concerned about photographing recognizable faces. There are so many ways you can do this by keeping the identity of your subject hidden, and you can still make really powerful, meaningful photographs. There's so many ways to do it. I really enjoy all the different ways. Again, I kind of follow my mood of the day, which way I'm going to approach. If I want to get close to people, if I'm going to be more minimalist, but so look at the different ways, get some inspiration, but really go out there and just do it. You but be aware that it's very addicting and you're probably gonna be forever addicted to street photography. Yeah. Because it's ever changing. You can never predict what's gonna happen. It's gonna be it it's so challenging that it will keep it'll keep you working. You'll always do better work. You'll never be there. You'll never be the best at it. And that's what's beautiful, because if you feel like you're the best at it, then it's boring. There is no challenge. So you'll learn forever and you'll be forever occupied. You'll never be bored again as long as you have a camera. Whether you're waiting for a train at the station, if you're on the train or waiting at the airport, you have opportunities. And that's really a beautiful thing.
Fantastic. See, that makes me want to grab my camera and go and do some street photography, which I might very well do later on this week. So,
Good.
thank you so much, Valerie, for inspiring me.
Well,
And
thank you.
no doubt, all of those listening and watching, it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on the podcast again. I'm sure this wouldn't have been the last time. So, thank you so much for being our guest on the Camera Shake podcast this week.
Thank you. And people can find my work at valeriejardin.com, VALERIEJARDIN. And it's the same on Instagram.
And of course, all the links will be in the description of the audio version and the video version over on YouTube as well. So if you want to look up any of Valerie's work, make sure you check the description. You'll find all the links down there. Okay, folks, that is it for today. It was fantastic having Valerie on the show. And as always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. Check out episode 227 with Karen Hutton. I'm sure you love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us continue creating and bring you more exciting episodes every week. It really does mean the world to us. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, did you know that there's a fully fledged video version over on YouTube with plenty of examples of our guest photography in full Technicolor? All you have to do is go over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you'll be able to watch all past episodes on there. And if you're already on YouTube, well, then just drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring that bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach a wider audience all over the world. So thank you for listening and watching. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday. So mark that in your calendars, diaries, whatever your kids use these days. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.